Traoré just landed in Moscow, not for talks, not for peace, for something far bigger. But why is Russia's most powerful stage handing the mic to Africa's most dangerous man? What is Traoré doing there? Let's find out. Traoré's arrival in Moscow on May 8, 2025 isn't just another diplomatic gesture. It's an act of profound psychological and political warfare. This is Russia's most sacred military celebration, and yet the cameras are not solely on its tanks or its nuclear-capable missiles. They're now also on a 36-year-old African president in military fatigues, quietly walking among world leaders in a city where Africa was never meant to matter. The symbolism is louder than the jets overhead. Traoré has not just entered Russian territory, he has walked onto the very stage where global power is declared, remembered, and rehearsed every year. And that shift tells us something far bigger. Africa is no longer on the outside looking in. It's stepping directly into the rituals of the empire, not to serve, but to rewrite. For decades, May 9th in Russia has been about glorifying the Soviet Union's resistance to Western fascism during World War II. It's more than a holiday. It's a message to the world that Russia remembers its trauma and wears it as armor. The parade isn't about nostalgia, it's about relevance. It's about telling NATO every year in thunderous volume, we are still here, and we have not forgotten who tried to erase us. But now, by standing there beside Putin, Traoré doesn't just attend a memory, he activates it in a new direction. Because the only other global figure currently resisting the West's grip with such unapologetic defiance through speech, action, and rejection of imperial structures is standing right there with the man who wrote that playbook. It's not an alliance of geography, it's an alliance of mindset. Russia and Burkina Faso, though worlds apart in size, are now shoulder to shoulder in symbolism. Both are telling the West, you thought we'd kneel. You were wrong. The most striking thing is that Traoré didn't come to play it safe. He came to stand where Western leaders refused to be seen. That parade was boycotted by many European powers. NATO was absent. The West remained quiet, arms folded, hoping no one would pay attention to who did show up. But the world did notice, because when Traoré showed up in Red Square, something impossible became undeniable. An African president, once dismissed as a rogue soldier with a gun, is now standing in the heart of a global military ceremony with the full respect of one of the most feared leaders on earth. This image isn't just for Burkinabés, it's for all Africans who grew up watching their presidents fly to Paris, to Washington, to Brussels, only to be given crumbs and lectures. Traoré didn't go there. He came here. And that choice itself is the revolution. It's not that Victory Day has suddenly become an African holiday, but in that moment, it became a shared battlefield. A place where Russia's old war against fascist Europe and Africa's new war against neo-colonial control met at a crossroads. The handshake between Putin and Traoré is not just a protocol photo. It is a redrawing of the post-World War II order that ignored African blood, African struggle, and African dignity. For the first time, Africa is not asking to be seen. It is stepping directly into the lens and claiming a seat in the story. And yet, what we saw on the parade ground is only half the story. What matters is what happens when the tanks roll away, the cameras turn off, and the doors close. Because Traoré did not just come to march. He came to negotiate, to build, to realign. And to prepare for the war Africa is already fighting, one that is economic, military, and psychological. That war isn't being waged tomorrow. It's already happening. And what Putin and Traoré discuss behind those Kremlin walls may shape how it ends. So what was said behind closed doors? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The jets had screamed overhead, the tanks had rolled. The world saw the photos, the smiles, and the ceremony. But what it didn't see, what truly mattered, began once the flags were folded and the doors closed. Because Traoré didn't travel to Moscow to be part of a parade, that was the cover. He came for the conversations that never make the news. The ones whispered in Kremlin corridors, far from microphones, where history is sculpted, not announced. And in those meetings, a far deeper story unfolded. one about Africa's new battlefield, the War of Alignment. Burkina Faso is not just seeking symbolic friendships, it is actively building a new ecosystem of survival, one where sovereignty is defended not through speeches, but through strategic deterrence. And in this regard, Russia is not just a friend, it's a lifeline. For Traoré, the days of begging for Western support while being surveilled, sabotaged, and starved are over. His mission in Moscow is surgical: secure the tools to make sure Burkina Faso never needs to knock on Paris's door again. And the Russians? They are more than ready to supply them. Inside those private sessions, according to early intelligence leaks and diplomatic sources, several layers of cooperation were outlined, none of which involved charity. Russia is not handing out aid. It is trading protection for partnership. The first item on the table: military infrastructure. Burkina Faso has survived on aging weapons, abandoned French arms, and inconsistent regional supply chains. Now the blueprint is different. Traoré wants a full overhaul: radar systems, anti-drone defense, air surveillance, encrypted communication networks, and training camps modeled not on NATO protocols, but on Russian battlefield resilience. The kind of defense that doesn't just protect borders, but prevents coups, drone assassinations, and foreign espionage. This is national survival by design. Second, energy independence. While Burkina Faso is not a major oil state, it is vulnerable to energy manipulation. Russian state companies, including Rosatom and Gazprom subsidiaries, are exploring ways to introduce modular nuclear energy systems, hybrid solar grids, and grain-for-energy exchange models, allowing Burkina Faso to power its cities without becoming trapped in Western greenwashing debt. The deal being structured would mean fuel imports tied to gold guarantees, not the US dollar, insulating the economy from sanctions and speculative currency warfare. Moscow, in return, secures a strategic ally in the Sahel and gains deeper access to gold corridors and rare earth elements in the region. But perhaps the most explosive area of cooperation is in cybersecurity and digital sovereignty. Traoré's government has been the target of disinformation campaigns, satellite surveillance, and cyber interference from foreign entities, hoping to destabilize the regime. What the West calls freedom of information, Traoré recognizes as digital colonization. Algorithms designed in Silicon Valley, tracking dissent, shaping perception, and distorting reality. In the Moscow meetings, this topic was central. Russia offered a firewall, the same systems deployed in Syria, Belarus, and Iran. These aren't just internet filters, they are sovereignty shields, capable of blocking Western military-grade surveillance and limiting digital psyops. Traoré isn't just protecting his government, he is protecting Africa's right to think independently, online and off. The West, of course, will call this censorship. They already are. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. They are terrified that Africa is building a resistance not just on land, but in code. That Africa, through leaders like Traoré, is starting to write its algorithm. And let's not ignore the currency issue, one of the most sensitive topics in every room Traoré enters. With Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso has openly discussed the death of the CFA franc. But replacing it with another Western-backed currency would be suicidal. In Moscow, a different approach is taking shape. Regional commodity-based trade through Russia's SPFS system, a direct alternative to SWIFT. This would allow AES countries to bypass French banks, European regulators, and the IMF transparency traps. Gold for grain, uranium for arms, infrastructure for long-term contracts, all in a system that never sees a dollar or euro. And this matters because it's not just financial autonomy, it's psychological warfare turned inside out. For the first time, Africa is choosing who counts its money. Of course, none of these deals will be confirmed publicly. Not now, not soon. The West is watching. NATO eyes are on Ouagadougou. The IMF will tighten its claws. The EU will offer new loans wrapped in poison. But what Traoré just did is irreversible. He didn't go to Moscow to escape. He went there to anchor something. He is welding Burkina Faso into a different system, one that will be hard to uproot without war. And for the West, that's the most dangerous thing of all. A young African leader who's no longer asking to be saved. He's asking to be left alone. But Traoré's journey doesn't end in that room. Because beyond weapons and wires, there's something else happening. something bigger than strategy. He didn't just build a deal, he built a myth, a new story about what African power looks like. And that myth? It's spreading fast. So the question now becomes, what does this moment mean for Africans watching from home? For the young, the angry, the silenced? You can buy weapons. You can trade for fuel. You can even negotiate cybersecurity with a foreign superpower. But what you can't fabricate, no matter how many diplomats or deals you deploy, is belief. What Traoré sparked by walking through Moscow's Red Square wasn't just an alliance. It was a transmission. A psychic voltage sent back to a continent whose youth have been walking in a fog of cynicism, exhaustion, and betrayal. Because after decades of IMF chains, broken democracies, sold-out leaders, and externally written constitutions, most young Africans never expected to see a leader stand beside global power and not flinch. But now they have. And the effect is electric. The power of that moment isn't in its press release, it's in its silence. In the screenshots passed around on phones, in the unspoken pride that spread through Ouagadougou, Bamako, Niamey, and far beyond. People didn't need analysis, they saw the image. A young African man in uniform, standing beside Vladimir Putin, not as a servant, not as a junior partner, not as a spectator, but as an equal on a day of empire. That image is more powerful than 1,000 policy papers. Because it tells every African child who has only seen their leaders bow, beg, or be bought, you don't have to be like them. And in a continent where so many have grown up being told that independence was already won, only to watch their lives dictated by loans, rankings, and Western embassies, the hunger for something real, something raw, something brave, has never been higher. Traoré is filling a space that wasn't political. It was emotional, spiritual. He is becoming what Sankara never got the chance to become, a living symbol of African refusal. That symbolism is not cheap, it is dangerous, because the West understands something African elites often forget. Symbols are harder to kill than people. They tried to kill Sankara. They tried to erase Lumumba. They tried to bury Nkrumah in exile. But the myth survived, because the people held it. Now Traoré is stepping directly into that current, and he's doing it while alive, while leading, while shaping policy that matches the posture. And the youth, they're watching closely, because this generation is different. They are online, they are armed with history, they are politically alert, and they are done with the scripts written for them. They have watched as their governments drag themselves to Paris for handouts. They have seen leaders arrest protesters while shaking hands with Macron. They have been told to be patient while watching their gold and lithium being exported to companies they cannot name. So when they see Traoré on that Kremlin stage, it's not just a win for Burkina Faso. It's a psychological jailbreak for millions who have been waiting for permission to believe in African power again. But belief is not a guarantee. It must be protected. That is why this moment is so delicate. Because the West knows how to destroy symbols, not always through war, but through corruption, isolation, and distortion. That's why disinformation campaigns will rise. That's why NGOs will start reporting on Burkina Faso's human rights. That's why Western media will spin every photo into paranoia. Because if the African youth begin to believe that Traoré is not a myth, but a model, the entire post-colonial power structure begins to shake. This is the unspoken war happening now, a war of imaginations. If Traoré wins the minds of the next generation, he doesn't need to conquer anything else. They will do the work themselves. They will become the next ministers, the next soldiers, the next journalists, the next builders. But if the West manages to stain him, fracture him, contain him, they can delay the wave. And Traoré knows this. That's why every move matters. Every word, every partnership. He is not just leading a country, he is nurturing a myth under fire. This is why Moscow matters so much. Not because it's Russia, but because it's the first time in decades that an African leader stood beside hard power. Real power without being mocked, without being ignored, without being used. He was received, he was respected, and that image now lives in the minds of millions who, until now, thought the only path to power was assimilation. This is the rebirth of belief. But belief needs space to grow, which is why the final question is now upon us. Can this myth survive the storm that's coming? The sabotage, the pressure, the temptations, the counterattacks, all of it? History is not changed by moments alone. It is changed by what happens after the moment. The photo of Traoré beside Putin will live forever, but the future of that image depends entirely on whether African societies are ready to rise with it, or whether they will quietly retreat into the old patterns that have kept them dependent, fractured, and controlled. And this is where the real fight begins. Because the truth is, the West doesn't need to overthrow Traoré with tanks. All it needs to do is wait for Africans to forget. Wait for the movement to slow. Wait for the fire to fade under the weight of routine, division, and internal compromise. That's how symbols die. Not with bullets, but with boredom. Not with assassinations, but with fatigue. So the burden now shifts from Traoré to the people. And it's a heavy burden. Because the African public has been burned before. They've watched charismatic leaders rise and fall, movements hijacked, promises broken, hopes deferred. They've seen Pan-Africanism become a hashtag, and anti-imperialism turned into empty slogans. Traoré offers something different, but it will mean nothing if it doesn't take root in the everyday, not just the epic. This means the revolution must now become administrative. It must become economic. It must become a real policy that feeds people, secures borders, protects integrity, and builds infrastructure that lasts beyond one presidency. It must be defended not just by soldiers, but by farmers, students, union leaders, and journalists willing to risk comfort for the country. The myth cannot be carried by Traoré alone. It must become a culture. And this is where the contradictions start to emerge, because many of the systems that Traoré is trying to destroy, corruption, elite capture, dependency, tribal politics, still exist within African societies themselves. The ghost of colonialism has moved inside our institutions. The West doesn't have to divide us. We often do that ourselves. If the AES alliance is to survive, if Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are to build something truly sovereign, it will not be enough to expel foreign troops or secure deals in Moscow. They will need to reinvent governance itself. They will need to create educational systems that reflect African realities. They will need to stop exporting raw materials for pennies and importing finished goods for millions. They will need to trust each other more than they trust the old metropoles. They will need to do the one thing that Africa has never done at scale: build with unity and without apology. That process won't be quick. It won't be glamorous. It won't make headlines, but it is the only way to turn what happened in Moscow into something permanent. Because the West is already recalculating. They know Traoré is not a fluke. They see the ripple effect. They see young Africans tweeting in support, marching in solidarity, challenging their leaders to be less like Macron's friends and more like Sahel's fighters. And they're scared, not because Traoré has weapons, but because he has meaning. But meaning is fragile in a world of distractions. It can be drowned out by entertainment, by manufactured outrage, by internal betrayals. That's why the final battle won't be fought with guns or speeches. It will be fought in discipline, in patience, whether Africa can protect what it has birthed. Because the truth is, if this moment dies, it won't be the West that killed it. It will be us. But if it lives, if Africa decides that it is tired of waiting, tired of watching, tired of explaining its pain to people who profit from it, then what happened on May 8, 2025, will be remembered not as a parade, but as a turning point. And the world will look back and say, this is when Africa stopped being a story told by others and started writing its ending. So the question now is no longer about Traoré. It's about us. Are you ready? Or will you just watch the myth walk by and let it disappear? Let us know in the comments section. Do you stand with Traoré? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.